Okay, so now I'm going to worry about finding the angle. And so far, when we've done all of these triangles, we've only worried about finding what these side lengths are. That's all we've really cared about. We haven't tried yet to find any of these angles, right? So now we're going to go over, well, how would I use sohcahtoa to find the angle measurement inside? So if I actually want to find the angles of something. And we're going to start with some, just how to use the calculator, and then we're going to move on to some more difficult ones where you actually get to use the sohcahtoa process. Okay? So the very first one says that the sine of x, right, is 0.7314. Remember, so this x is going to be an angle. That's what it's saying. It's saying the sine of an angle is 0.7314. There's two ways that you can solve this. The first is on my blog site, I put this table here for you. It's called the Consumable Table of Tangents, Sines, and Cosines. I put this table here, and what you can do is you can look on this, and here you have your angles, and then here I have the sine of those angles, right? So I can go down through, and I can look all the way through and scan and see, hey, where is this? And so if I just start to scan down, I go all the way through, and I'm over here, and then I find 0.7314, because I'm still in that sine column. And then when I look here, what I'm finding, this is that angle measurement, so 47 degrees. Okay, so I could use this table, and I could scan down through, and it's pretty easy because it's in hierarchy, numerical hierarchy order. So when you come down through, you could just say, okay, 0.7193, 0.7314, 0.7. So, oh yeah, there it is, 0.7314. It must be a 47-degree angle. So I could write this then, that, well, x is equal to 47 degrees. Okay. There's another way to do this, and this is the way that we're going to probably do it most often. And this is actually using the calculator to solve this. So, for instance, on this number 2, this one here, what I'm going to do is it says the cosine of x is 0.9986. So remember, this must be an angle. Okay. Now, what you could do is you could just use inverse operations, right? So I could take the inverse of cosine x, and actually then I'm just left with x, and then I could also take the inverse of 0.9986. So cosine inverse of 0.9986. Okay. So on your calculator, how do you get to the inverse function is right above the cosine. You see there's written in yellow, it says cosine -1. That's the cosine inverse. So you would simply hit second function, cosine, and that's going to give you this cosine inverse. Okay? It opens up the parentheses, and you type in there 0.9986, close those parentheses, hit enter, and it's going to tell you that x is equal to 3.03. Now, a lot of times what we do is we round to the nearest whole degree, so we just say that that would be 3 degrees. Okay. So two different ways. This is just using the table. Number 1 is just using the table here and scanning, and number 2 is using the calculator, taking the inverse of both sides. So if I take the inverse of cosine x, you're just left with x. Anytime I take the inverse, then I'm just going to be left with x here, and then the inverse of cosine inverse of 0.9986, and you're left with that 3 degrees. So this is finding the angle. Now down bottom here, this is number 3. We're going to look at this, and this is a little bit different. This is what how most of the homework's going to look. And the very first thing they're asking us is find this angle, right? It's x degrees. So I have to, I'm going to have to look and see, well, what am I going to use? So, ka, or toa. Right? I can look up and based on x, I say, well, if this is x and that's my, then this must be the adjacent side because it's next to that angle. And then directly across from it is the opposite side. So I have O and A. The only one with O and A is toa. So to set this up, it would be the tangent of x would be equal to the opposite, 23, divided by the adjacent side, 28. Okay, so a tangent of x equals 23 over 28. Now I want to take the inverse, the tangent inverse of both those to get x alone. So tangent inverse, this is what the math looks like, times tangent of x, right? And then the tangent inverse, what you do to one side, you have to do the other of 23 over 28. Okay, so this is just showing you how this works. Of course, these cancel. You're just left with x here is going to be equal to the tangent inverse of 23 over 28. So I put that in my calculator. I hit second function, tangent. It gives me that tangent -1. Has the open parentheses, 23 divided by 28. Close the parentheses, hit enter. X is equal to 39.4 degrees. Remember, we're around to the nearest whole number, so 39 degrees. Okay, on to the last one. And so I'm on number 4 here. I'm kind of crammed in. But number 4 says I have my angle here, x. That's what I want to solve for. I have a side that's 78 and then a side that's 92. Okay. Well, looking at this, my side that's 78 is next to, or it's adjacent, and my side that's 92 is opposite that right angle, so this must be the hypotenuse. Well, which one has A and H? Ka, right? So it must be the cosine of x would be equal to the adjacent side, 78, over 92, the hypotenuse. Remember, I'm just going to, I want to find the angle, so when you find the angle, you're going to use the inverse of this, so I just say x is going to be equal to the cosine inverse of 78 divided by 92. I plug that in my calculator, so again I hit second function, cosine, that gives me cosine -1, 78 divided by 92. Close the parentheses. 32.02. I round to the nearest whole, so 32 degrees. Okay, so that is how you solve for the angle. Remember, normally if you just want to solve for the side, you have to have an angle, and then you're just going to use the sine, cosine, or tangent function. But now if we're going to solve for the angle, right, we don't have any of the angles, we just must have two sides. Based on that ratio, then we could take the inverse function, that's what this is again, the inverse function, and we could solve for that angle. Okay, so good luck, and I'd like you to do numbers 19 through 30 in your VTAM book.